Lila Carter, a 32-year-old single mother of Emma, 10, and Noah, 6, stared at the faded for sale sign nailed to a sagging fence post. The wood was splintered and sun-bleached, swaying slightly in the dry Nebraska breeze, a stark contrast to the bustling chaos her life had become. After the viral success of her trailer bunker story on Farmer's Heartland Tales, a flood of donations had poured in, transforming her modest savings into a small nest egg. The tale of the mysterious trapdoor in her old trailer had captured imaginations, turning her into an unwilling local celebrity. But the attention brought gawkers, curious strangers peering through her windows, knocking at odd hours, and clogging her driveway with their cars. The once quiet life she'd built for Emma and Noah was gone, replaced by a suffocating crowd. She craved solitude, a place where her children could breathe and she could think. The deserted ranch in New Mexico, listed for a steal at $500, seemed like an answer to her prayers. She found it online late one night, scrolling through listings with tired eyes, the kids asleep beside her. The photos showed cracked adobe walls, a sprawling expanse of desert, and a rickety barn, imperfect but full of potential. The price was absurdly low, a red flag she ignored in her desperation. With Emma chattering about riding horses and Noah dreaming of open skies where he could fly his kite, Lila felt a flicker of hope. The isolation didn't scare her, it beckoned. The realtor, Hank, was a wiry man with a leathery tan and a nervous tic that made his left eye twitch. He met her at the property, his pickup kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop. His warning came as they stood by the sagging fence, the wind carrying the faint scent of sagebrush. "This place is remote, a mess." "Carter," he said, adjusting his hat. "No neighbors for miles, and folks around here talk about old ghosts. Strange stories, you know. Used to be a ranch, but it's been empty a long time." His gaze darted to the horizon, then back to her, as if expecting her to bolt. But Lila saw past the warnings. The cracked adobe could be patched, the barn repaired. She pictured Emma and Noah running free, their laughter filling the silence. The secrets buried beneath the land didn't cross her mind. She signed the papers that afternoon in Hank's cramped office, her hand trembling slightly, not from doubt, but from the weight of the decision. The kids were in the back seat, drawing horses on scrap paper, their excitement infectious. As they drove the long road to Juniper Hollow, the landscape shifted from Nebraska's rolling plains to New Mexico's stark desert. The trailer she towed behind her felt like a lifeline, its familiar creaks a comfort amid the unknown. When they arrived, the ranch loomed before them, silent, weathered, and waiting. The adobe glowed faintly in the late afternoon sun, but the shadows stretched long, hinting at corners untouched by light. Lila unloaded their belongings, her mind buzzing with plans, unaware that the cracked earth held more than just roots and rocks. Beneath it lay a history she couldn't yet fathom, one that would soon unravel the quiet life she sought. The ranch was a crumbling relic, sagging barns with peeling paint, a creaky hacienda where every floorboard groaned underfoot, and acres of brittle grass that crunched like shattered glass beneath their boots. The family had inherited it from Lila's estranged uncle, a man she barely remembered, and it felt more like a burden than a gift. Dust coated every surface, and the air carried the faint scent of decay and forgotten livestock. On their first night, a storm rolled in, its thunder shaking the fragile walls and rattling the windows with a relentless fury. Rain lashed the roof, drumming a chaotic rhythm that kept everyone on edge. Noah, ever restless, couldn't stay still. Armed with a flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows, he wandered into the hacienda's cluttered basement. The storm's howling masked his footsteps as he poked around crates and cobwebs, his curiosity a beacon in the gloom. Then, with a yelp, he tripped over something uneven beneath a pile of hay. "Mom, there's a hole," he shouted, his voice cutting through the storm's roar. Lila hurried down, her boots slipping on the damp steps. She found Noah brushing hay aside, revealing a trapdoor embedded in the floor. Its iron hinges were rusted but intact, the wood weathered to a grayish hue. The discovery sent a shiver down her spine, not from the cold, but from the sudden sense that this place held more than just memories. Emma, trailing behind with a frown, muttered about snakes and abandoned nests, her skepticism a sharp contrast to Noah's excitement. "Probably just a root cellar," she said, crossing her arms. But Lila's curiosity, a quiet fire that had always driven her, wouldn't let it rest. She retrieved an old lantern from the kitchen, its flame flickering to life with a soft hiss. Armed with its warm glow, she knelt by the trapdoor. The hinges protested as she lifted it, the sound a grating screech that echoed in the basement. Beneath lay a narrow tunnel, its walls lined with rough stone, slick with moisture from the storm above. The air that rose from it was cool and damp, carrying an earthy scent laced with something metallic. Her heart pounded, a steady drumbeat against her ribs as she peered into the darkness. Emma hovered at the top, her voice a mix of concern and irritation. "Lila, this is crazy. What if it collapses?" But Lila barely heard her. She stepped onto the first stone step, the lantern swaying in her hand, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The tunnel stretched ahead, its end swallowed by blackness, hinting at something more than a mere storage space. The stones were uneven, some chipped as if struck by tools long ago, and the floor sloped downward, pulling her deeper. She ran a hand along the wall, feeling the cold roughness, and noticed faint scratches, marks that didn't seem natural, like someone had carved them with purpose. A sudden drip echoed, water plinking into a puddle somewhere ahead, and Lila froze. The sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic for the storm's chaos. She held her breath, listening, but the noise stopped as abruptly as it began. Noah's voice floated down from above. "Mom, you okay?" His worry steadied her, and she called back, yet just exploring. But her mind raced. This wasn't a root cellar. The tunnel's construction, the markings, the strange stillness, it suggested secrecy, a purpose buried beneath the ranch's decay. She took another step, the lantern's light revealing a bend ahead. The air grew heavier, and a faint hum vibrated through the stone, so low she felt it more than heard it. Her imagination spun, bunkers, hidden rooms, relics of a past she didn't yet understand. Emma's voice broke through again, sharper now. "Lila, come back. This isn't safe." Reluctantly, she turned, the lantern's glow retreating with her. But as she climbed back to the trapdoor, the tunnel's darkness seemed to watch her, promising answers if she dared return. Days turned to weeks as Lila and the kids settled into the rhythm of their new life on the dusty outskirts of Lincoln County, New Mexico. The trailer, with its creaking floors and faded curtains, began to feel like home, its quirks, sagging couch, leaky faucet, becoming familiar companions in their journey. The vast desert stretched beyond the windows, a sea of sand and sagebrush under a sky that shifted from fiery orange at dawn to a deep indigo at night. The kids, Emma at 12 and Jake at 9, adapted quickly, exploring the barren land with the fearless curiosity of youth, while Lila found solace in the quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of their old city life. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound peace, the tunnel lurked in her thoughts, an enigma that refused to fade. It haunted her dreams, shadowy corridors stretching into an abyss, whispers carried on a cold breeze that brushed against her skin like ghostly fingers. She'd wake with a start, heart pounding, the image of that trapdoor etched in her mind. During the day, she'd catch herself staring at the faded rug that hid it, her fingers itching to lift it again. The trailer might be their sanctuary, but that subterranean passage hinted at a story unfinished, a mystery demanding to be unraveled. Determined to uncover its secrets, Lila resolved to return one evening, armed with more than just courage. From a tiny library in town, she borrowed a worn copy of a local historian's book on New Mexico outlaws, penned by Claire Martinez. The book, its pages yellowed and dog-eared, detailed the exploits of figures like Billy the Kid, whose legend loomed large over the region. Clara's scribbled notes in the margins suggested some of his rumored hideouts might still lie hidden near Lincoln County, untouched by time or treasure hunters. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the trailer park, Lila prepared for her descent. She grabbed a crowbar from the toolbox mister. Delgado had lent her, its cold steel a reassuring weight in her hands, and tucked Clara's book under her arm, its leather cover worn smooth by countless readers. Emma and Jake, drawn by the promise of adventure, watched from the trailer steps, their eyes bright with anticipation. Emma, with her braided hair and thoughtful gaze, clutched a notebook, ready to jot down any discoveries, while Jake, all energy and mischief, bounced on his heels, a stick in hand as if it were a sword. Lila knelt by the trapdoor, the rug pulled aside to reveal the rusted metal beneath. The crowbar's edge scraped against the lock, a grating sound that set her teeth on edge. With a grunt of effort, she leaned into it, muscles straining against the resistance. The lock, stubborn from decades of neglect, finally gave way with a sharp crack, and the familiar creak echoed as the door lifted. The concrete staircase descended into the earth, its darkness swallowing the last rays of daylight. This time, she carried a flashlight in one hand, its beam cutting through the gloom, and Clara's book in the other, its pages fluttering slightly in the damp air that rose to meet her. The tunnel's walls, rough and cold to the touch, seemed to close in as she stepped down, the beam of light dancing across the stone. The air carried a musty scent, a mix of earth and something metallic, like old blood or forgotten tools. Halfway down, she paused, her breath catching as the flashlight caught something new. Carvings etched into the wall, shallow but deliberate. She traced the letters with her fingers, feeling the grooves under her skin. B. And a date, 1878. Her breath hitched in her throat. Billy the Kid, the infamous outlaw, had roamed these parts over a century ago, his legend woven into the fabric of New Mexico's history. Raids, escapes, and a death at 21 that only deepened his myth. Could this be one of his hideouts? The historian's notes had hinted at such possibilities, mentioning caves and tunnels used by outlaws to evade the law, but seeing the initials felt like stepping into a story she'd only read about. Her heart pounded, a mix of awe and trepidation, as she pressed on, the tunnel narrowing before opening into a larger chamber. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of earth and decay, as if the passage had been sealed for generations. Lila's flashlight swept the space, revealing a collapsed wall on the far side. Chunks of stone and dirt spilled across the floor, a chaotic pile that spoke of time's relentless march. But amid the rubble, glints of metal caught her eye, winking in the light like stars in a clouded sky. She edged closer, her boots crunching on the debris, and brushed away the dirt with her hand. The glints resolved into something solid. Coins, tarnished but unmistakable, their edges worn smooth by time, and what looked like the edge of a metal box half buried in the collapse. Her mind raced. Treasure? A stash left by Billy the Kid himself, hidden from the law or rival gangs like the Dolan faction he'd clashed with. The thought sent a thrill through her, tempered by the weight of history pressing down. Emma's voice broke the silence, soft but eager, as she peered over Lila's shoulder, having crept down the stairs with Jake in tow. Is that gold? The girl's eyes were wide, reflecting the flashlight's glow, her notebook forgotten in her lap. Jake, bolder, scrambled down the steps to join them, his sneakers scuffing the concrete, a grin splitting his face. Maybe it's loot, he whispered, his voice tinged with excitement, as if they'd stumbled into a pirate tale. Lila's caution wrestled with her curiosity. She pulled the metal box free, its surface scratched and dented, a crude lock still intact. The coins spilled in her palm. Old, heavy, their designs faded but hinting at a bygone era. But the box's contents remained a mystery, and the collapsed wall suggested more lay buried. Was this a treasure trove or a trap, a decoy meant to lure the unwary? She thought of Clara's warnings about outlaws' tricks, false caches rigged with danger, or tunnels that collapsed to bury pursuers. The chamber felt alive now, the silence pressing against her ears, as if the past itself held its breath. She glanced at the carvings again, noting a faint line beneath the date, a map, perhaps, or a clue to where the tunnel led. The historian's book mentioned Billy's cunning, his ability to vanish into the desert, leaving behind riddles for those who followed. This tunnel might be more than a hideout. It could be a key to his final days, a piece of the puzzle lost to time. As she traced the line with her finger, a low rumble shook the chamber, dust sifting from the ceiling like fine ash. The kids gasped, and Lila's instincts kicked in. She grabbed their hands, the box under her arm, and hurried them back toward the stairs, the rumble growing into a tremor that vibrated through the concrete. At the top, the trapdoor slammed shut behind them with a clang, the rumble fading into an eerie stillness that settled over the trailer. Lila sat on the floor, the metal box beside her, coins glinting in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Emma clutched her arm, whispering, "What was that?" her voice trembling with a mix of fear and wonder. Jake's eyes darted to the trapdoor, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a wide-eyed stare. Lila didn't answer immediately, her mind spinning with possibilities. The tunnel held echoes of the past, Billy the Kid's legacy, perhaps, but also a warning. Whatever lay beneath, it wasn't ready to give up its secrets so easily. She set the box on the table, its lock a stubborn barrier, and opened Clara's book to the section on Billy. The historian had written of his last years, his hideouts near Lincoln after the Lincoln County War, and a rumored stash he never retrieved before his death. The carvings, the coins, the box, they fit the pattern. But the rumble suggested instability, a reminder that the tunnel was as much a danger as a discovery. Lila's thoughts drifted to the kids, their safety her priority. She couldn't risk another trip without help, without knowing more. The next day, she planned to visit Clara Martinez herself, the historian's address scrawled in the book's front cover. That night, as the family ate a simple dinner of canned soup and bread, the trailer creaked with the wind outside, a sound that mimicked the whispers from her dreams. Emma sketched the carvings in her notebook, her pencil scratching softly, while Jake poked at the coins with a fork, speculating about bandits and shootouts. Lila watched them, a smile tugging at her lips despite the unease. This land, this trailer, this tunnel. There's now a legacy tied to a legend. But the box sat unopened, its contents a question mark, and the trapdoor below pulsed with a silent promise. The past wasn't done with them yet, and Lila knew her journey had only begun. The chamber's air was thick with the scent of earth and decay as Lila's flashlight beam swept across the rough concrete walls. The damp, musty odor clung to her nostrils, a blend of ancient soil and something faintly metallic, as if the walls themselves held secrets locked away for decades. The concrete was cold and uneven under her touch, pocked with small cracks that spiderwebbed outward, hinting at the passage of time. In the center of the small, square room, half buried in a layer of fine dust that had settled like a shroud, sat a rusted chest. Its iron hinges were caked with grime, the metal pitted and corroded, while a crumbling layer of red wax sealed the lid, its edges cracked and flaking like dried blood. Her heart raced as she knelt beside it, the crowbar still in hand from prying open the trapdoor above, its weight a reassuring presence against the uncertainty of the moment. With careful pressure, she chipped away at the wax, the sound of each tap echoing faintly in the confined space, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to match the thudding of her own heart. The lid groaned as it lifted a low, reluctant creak that sent a shiver down her spine, revealing a trove that stole her breath. Inside were coins, their surfaces tarnished with a patina of age, but legible, stamped with 1860 in bold, worn letters that spoke of a bygone era. The metal gleamed dully under the flashlight's beam, each coin a small relic of history, edges softened by time. Beneath them lay a leather pouch, its stitching frayed and brittle, the leather cracked and peeling at the seams. It was heavy with gold nuggets, rough and unpolished, glinting with a muted luster that caught the light in fleeting sparks. Lila's fingers brushed the cold metal, her mind spinning with possibilities. Wealth, yes, but also a connection to something larger, something that tied her to the land she now called home. Tucked into a corner of the chest was a tattered note, the paper brittle and yellowed, its edges curling inward as if shrinking from the world. She unfolded it with trembling hands, the ink faded but clear enough to read, the letters slanting in a hurried scrawl, for the fight be. Her breath hitched. Could this be Billy the Kid's loot, hidden after a heist in the wild days before his death in 1881? The thought sent a thrill through her, connecting her to a legend she'd only read about in history books, a figure whose name was synonymous with the untamed frontier. The initials B seemed to pulse with meaning, a signature that might unlock a piece of the past she hadn't anticipated. Overwhelmed but eager to share the discovery, she called the kids, Tommy and Mia, her younger cousins who'd tag along out of boredom, down into the chamber. Their footsteps clattered on the concrete staircase, their voices a mix of curiosity and impatience as they descended into the dim light. Their eyes widened as they saw the treasure. The coins and nuggets spread like a pirate's hoard, and soon they were dancing around the chest, their laughter bouncing off the walls in a joyous cacophony. Tommy, all of 10 years old with a mop of unruly brown hair, clutched a coin in his small hand, declaring himself a cowboy bandit with a theatrical flourish, his imagination running wild with tales of shootouts and daring escapes. Mia, a year younger with a mischievous grin, stuffed a nugget in her pocket with a triumphant giggle, her dark eyes sparkling with delight. For a moment, the find felt like a triumph, a secret shared among them in the dim light, a bond forged in the thrill of discovery. But Lila's joy faded as her gaze drifted to the floor. In the dust, illuminated by the flashlight's beam, were footprints, clear, fresh, and too large to be theirs. The impressions were deep, the edges crisp, as if made by heavy boots that had lingered just moments before. Her stomach tightened, a cold not forming as she realized someone else had been here recently, and they knew about this hidden chamber. The air seemed to grow heavier, the silence pressing in as she exchanged a glance with the kids, their excitement dimming as they noticed her unease. Tommy's grin faltered, and Mia's hand froze mid-motion, the nugget slipping back into the pouch. "Let's get out of here," she whispered, her voice tight with a mix of fear and determination. They gathered the chest's contents hastily, the coins clinking softly, the note clutched in her hand like a lifeline, and climbed back up the staircase, the trapdoor creaking shut behind them with a finality that echoed in the stillness. Back in the hacienda, the evening shadows stretched long across the floor, the fading light casting jagged patterns through the cracked blinds. Lila tried to shake the feeling of being watched, but it clung to her like damp air, a persistent unease that settled into her bones. She set the chest on the kitchen table, the coins and nuggets spread out like a puzzle waiting to be solved, their weight a tangible reminder of the mystery unfolding around her. The kids chattered about Billy the Kid, spinning wild tales of bank robberies and midnight rides, their voices a bright counterpoint to the tension simmering beneath her calm exterior. But Lila's mind was elsewhere, replaying the footprints, the sealed chest, the note's cryptic message. She picked up the phone to call her uncle, a retired sheriff who might know something about local legends, only to hear silence. No dial tone, just a dead line that buzzed faintly like a warning. Her pulse quickened, a surge of adrenaline sharpening her senses. She checked the cord, tracing it to the jack, but it was no use. The line was cut, the wire severed cleanly, with a precision that suggested intent. That night, as the desert wind howled outside, a shadow moved past the window. Lila froze, her breath catching as she peered through the cracked blinds, the glass cold against her fingertips. The shape was indistinct, swallowed by the darkness beyond the porch light's weak glow, but it moved with purpose, a deliberate stride that sent a chill down her spine. The wind carried a faint rustle, perhaps the crunch of gravel underfoot, though she couldn't be sure. She ushered the kids into the back room, herding them under a blanket with a flashlight and the chest's contents, her movements quick but controlled to keep them from panicking. Isolation, once a comfort in Juniper Hollow, now felt like a trap, the vastness of the desert pressing in around the hacienda's thin walls. The silence grew heavier, punctuated only by the creak of the old house settling and the occasional gust rattling the windows. She grabbed a kitchen knife, its blade dull but solid in her grip, her only defense against the unknown, and stood by the door, listening with every fiber of her being. The shadow didn't return, but the sense of threat lingered, a silent promise that this discovery had opened a door she might not be able to close. As the hours ticked by, Lila's thoughts raced. She considered the note again for the fight be, and wondered what the fight meant. Was it a battle against lawmen, a personal struggle, or was something deeper tied to the land itself? The footprints suggested someone else was invested in this treasure, perhaps a descendant of Billy's gang or a modern treasure hunter who tracked the legend to her doorstep. She recalled old Gus's cryptic words at the diner, his avoidance of her questions about the trailer's history, and wondered if he knew more than he'd let on. The cut phone line fueled her suspicion. Someone didn't want her reaching out, didn't want her sharing this find. She glanced at the kids, now huddled together under the blanket, their breathing steady as they drifted into uneasy sleep, and felt a surge of protectiveness. This was no longer just about gold or history. It was about keeping her family safe. Dawn broke with a pale light that filtered through the blinds, revealing a world still and silent. Lila stepped outside, the knife still in hand, and scanned the yard. The gravel path showed no clear tracks, the wind having erased any evidence of the night's visitor. But as she circled the hacienda, she noticed something odd, a small pile of cigarette butts near the shed, their filters stained and fresh. Someone had waited out there, watching, perhaps all night. Her resolve hardened. She wouldn't let fear dictate her next move. She gathered the chest's contents into a burlap sack, hiding it under the floorboards beneath her bed, and decided to investigate further. The tunnels held more answers, she was sure, and she wouldn't rest until she understood the full scope of what she'd uncovered. That afternoon, with the kids occupied with a board game, Lila returned to the trapdoor, her flashlight and crowbar in tow. The chamber felt different in daylight, the shadows less oppressive but the air still thick with mystery. She examined the walls more closely, her fingers tracing the concrete until she found a seam, a hidden panel, barely visible, that gave way under pressure. Behind it was a narrow shaft, its depths lost to darkness. Her heart pounded as she considered descending, but the memory of the footprints held her back. Instead, she marked the spot with a piece of chalk from her pocket and retreated, planning to return with help. Over the next few days, Lila pieced together what she could. She visited the local library, sifting through microfilm records of old newspapers, and found mentions of Billy Kane's rumored hideouts in the region, including a vague reference to a concrete vault near Juniper Hollow. She cross-referenced this with land deeds, discovering her trailer sat on property once owned by a man named Elias Kane, possibly a relative. The puzzle was coming together, but each clue raised new questions. Who else knew of this connection? And why they cut her phone line? The tension peaked one evening when a knock sounded at the door. Lila opened it cautiously, knife hidden behind her back, to find old Gus standing there, his hat in his hands. His eyes were troubled, his usual gruff demeanor softened by something like guilt. "Heard you found something," he said, his voice low. "Ain't safe to keep it. Folks around here, they don't forget." Before she could press him, he turned and left, leaving her with more questions than answers. That night, the whistle on the wind returned, and with it, the sense that the unseen guardian, whether Billy's ghost or something else, was watching, waiting to see what she'd do next. The next morning, Lila woke to a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air. The New Mexico sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a pale glow through the trailer's cracked blinds. But the cold seemed to seep from within, a premonition that tightened her chest. As she shuffled to the door with her coffee, the mug's warmth a small comfort against her trembling hands, she froze. A scrap of paper was pinned to the weathered wood with a rusty nail, the handwriting jagged and hurried, as if scrawled in a rush under moonlight. The words leaped out at her, "Leave the gold or pay." Her stomach dropped, the mug trembling so violently that coffee sloshed over the rim, burning her fingers. Gold. She had no gold. Only a crumbling trailer with peeling paint, a mystery she couldn't shake, and 2 children depending on her. Panic clawed at her throat, a wild animal desperate to escape, but she forced it down, swallowing hard. She had to protect Sam and Ellie, no matter what. The note fluttered slightly in the breeze, its threat hanging like a storm cloud over the quiet morning. She gathered Sam and Ellie in the living room, their sleepy faces turning wary as the gravity of her expression sank in. Sam, at 12, rubbed his eyes, his dark hair a mess, while Ellie, 8, clutched her stuffed rabbit, her small frame tense. "We're locking all the doors and windows from now on," Lila said, her voice steady despite the knot twisting in her chest. She moved to demonstrate, checking the flimsy latch on the nearest window, her fingers fumbling with the lock. "Stay close, and if you see anyone strange, you come get me." "Got it." They nodded, wide-eyed, the room filling with a silence heavier than the desert night. She handed Sam the kitchen knife, its blade dull but menacing in his inexperienced grip, and stressed it was only for emergencies, her voice firm, though her heart ached at the thought. Ellie clung to her arm, her whisper barely audible. "What's happening, Mama?" Lila hugged her tight, the girl's warmth grounding her. But she had no answer, only a growing dread that tightened its grip with each passing second. Determined to get help, she drove to the sheriff's station, a squat building on the edge of Juniper Hollow, its faded signs swaying in the wind. The interior smelled of stale coffee and old paper, the walls lined with wanted posters yellowed by time. Sheriff Morales was a gruff man with a gray mustache that bristled when he spoke, his desk buried under a chaotic pile of coffee cups and case files, each one a testament to a town too small for its secrets. She handed him the note, her voice tight as she recounted the trapdoor discovery, the notebook's cryptic pages, and now this ominous threat. He leaned back in his creaking chair, squinting at her through tired eyes, the lines on his face deepening. "Sounds like rancher jitters," he said, waving it off with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Folks out here get spooked by shadows. Probably some kid playing a prank." His tone was laced with skepticism, but he scribbled a note on a pad, promising to send a deputy to poke around, though his lack of urgency left Lila with little comfort. She pressed him for more. Had there been other threats, other incidents? But he shrugged, muttering about overactive imaginations, and sent her on her way with a curt nod. Back at the trailer, the silence felt heavier, a palpable weight pressing against the thin walls. The kids were at school, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the echo of the note's warning. That afternoon, driven by a need for answers, she returned to the trapdoor, flashlight in hand, its beam a fragile lifeline against the growing darkness. The notebook's cryptic pages gnawed at her, dates from the 1960s, mentions of the project, symbols that danced just beyond understanding, and she needed to know more. Descending the concrete stairs, the air cool and damp against her skin, she noticed a narrow crack in the wall she'd missed before, a jagged line barely visible in the flashlight's glow. With some effort, she wedged her fingers into it, prying with all her strength until the concrete gave way, revealing a second tunnel. Its air was stale and earthy, thick with the scent of undisturbed soil, and it sloped downward into shadows that swallowed her light. The tunnel led to an old well, its stone walls slick with moss, the water at the bottom a black mirror reflecting her uncertain face. Her flashlight beam caught something glinting at the base, a flicker of metal against the gloom. Heart pounding, she climbed down, her boots slipping on the damp stones, each step a gamble against the unknown. At the bottom, she found a skeleton slumped against the wall, its bony fingers wrapped around a Colt revolver, its grip worn smooth by time, its barrel tarnished with rust. The sight stole her breath, a cold wave crashing over her. Could it be Billy's gun, the man mentioned in the notebook's faded entries? The one who'd built this bunker in the Cold War shadow? The thought sent a shiver through her, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a hiding spot. It was a grave, a silent witness to a story unfinished. She reached for the revolver, its weight cold and heavy in her hand, a grim relic of the past she was now entangled in. The discovery steeled her resolve, a spark igniting amid the fear. She climbed back up, clutching the revolver, its metal a grim promise, as she resolved to uncover the truth and protect her family at all costs. But that night, the intruder struck again. A sharp crack shattered the quiet. A bullet hole punched through the kitchen window, glass spraying across the counter in a glittering cascade. Lila ducked, pulling Sam and Ellie to the floor as her heart raced, the Colt slipping into her hand with instinctive urgency. The kids pressed against her, their breathing ragged, while she peered out through the shattered pane, seeing nothing but the dark desert stretching beyond, its silence mocking her. The note's threat echoed in her mind. Leave the gold or pay. No gold, no retreat. Only a fight for her family's safety. She gripped the Colt, its weight a grim promise, and knew the stakes had just gotten deadly. The hours that followed were a blur of adrenaline and strategy. Lila barricaded the windows with whatever she could find, old boards from the shed, a mattress dragged from the kids' room, her hands shaking but determined. She kept the revolver close, its presence a constant reminder of the skeleton below, of Billy's fate, and the danger now at her door. Sam, wide-eyed but resolute, helped nail the boards, while Ellie sat in the corner, clutching her rabbit, her small voice asking over and over, "Are we safe now?" Lila could only nod, though doubt gnawed at her. The sheriff's indifference replayed in her mind, fueling a resolve to rely on herself. She checked the trailer's perimeter, the flashlight beam dancing over the sand, searching for footprints or signs of the intruder, but the desert gave up nothing. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lila sat with the kids, the revolver on the table between them. She explained they'd need to be vigilant, to watch each other's backs, her voice a mix of strength and vulnerability. The notebook lay open beside the gun, its pages a map to a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. Mentions of containment, sketches of Juniper Hollow, and that chilling line, "They're still watching." She wondered if the intruder was tied to those words, if the gold was more than a myth, a lure for something darker. The well's discovery haunted her, the skeleton's silent stare question she couldn't answer. Was it Billy, guarding his treasure even in death? Or someone else, a victim of the same threat now aimed at her? That day, she decided to dig deeper, literally. With Sam's help, she returned to the well, armed with ropes and a makeshift pulley from a shed. The descent was slower this time, the air thicker, the silence oppressive. They found more, scattered coins, tarnished but real, glinting in the dirt, and a leather pouch with a faded map, its lines tracing paths beneath the ranch. The find confirmed the gold's existence, but also raised new fears. If she had it, others knew too. Back above, she hid the pouch in the trailer's false panel, her mind racing with plans. She'd need to confront the sheriff again, demand action, or seek help beyond Juniper Hollow's borders. The nights grew tense, each sound, a creak of the trailer, a rustle in the sand, setting her on edge. She took to sleeping lightly, the Colt under her pillow, while Sam and Ellie shared a room, their whispered fears a soft hum in the dark. The community offered little support. Rumors of her gold fever spread, turning neighbors' glances wary. Yet, amid the isolation, Lila found strength. She began documenting everything, the note, the well, the map, in a journal, a record to protect her story. The revolver, once a stranger's, became hers, a tool of survival in a fight she hadn't chosen. Weeks passed, the threat a shadow that never fully materialized but never fully faded. One evening, as she sat by the fireplace, the map spread before her. A knock came at the door. Her hand went to the Colt, but it was old Gus, his face pale, under his hat. "Heard about the trouble," he rasped, holding out a worn photograph of Billy Kane, alive, standing by the well. "He was my brother," Gus admitted, his voice breaking. "He hid the gold to keep it safe, but it cost him. Whoever's after it won't stop." The revelation shifted everything, tying Lila to a legacy she hadn't anticipated. With Gus's help, she vowed to unravel the mystery, to turn the intruder's threat into a stand for her family's future. The gold a symbol of resilience, not ruin. The chapter stretched into a saga of courage. Each day a battle against fear, each night a vigil against the unseen. Lila's journey, from a trembling mother to a guardian of her legacy, was etched in the desert's silence, the revolver her shield, the map her guide, and the children her heart. Sheriff Morales returned to Lila's trailer the next afternoon, his boots kicking up a fine cloud of dust as he stepped inside, the creak of the floorboards announcing his arrival. The late summer heat pressed against the thin walls, making the air inside feel thick and stale. Trailing behind him was a wiry woman, her presence sharp and deliberate, as if she carried the weight of history in her every step. This was Clara, a local historian known around Juniper Hollow for her encyclopedic knowledge of the region's past. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and a satchel slung over her shoulder bulged with papers and artifacts. She carried the revolver Lila had unearthed near the trapdoor, its metal glinting faintly under the trailer's dim, flickering light. The weapon, cold and heavy, seemed to pulse with the echoes of its past. Clara adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and examined the revolver closely, her fingers tracing the worn grip with the care of a curator handling a priceless relic. "This is from the late 1800s, she said, her voice steady and authoritative, cutting through the hum of the ceiling fan. The design matches firearms used during Billy the Kid's era. Could be his, or at least from someone riding with him." She turned the gun over, pointing out the faint etchings on the barrel, marks worn smooth by time but still hinting at a story etched in steel. Lila's pulse quickened, a rush of adrenaline mixing with the dry desert air. The trapdoor, the cryptic notebook filled with strange symbols, and now this revolver. Each clue tied her deeper to the outlaw's legend, pulling her into a narrative she hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the rickety kitchen table, her mind racing with possibilities. Clara went on, her tone growing speculative, her eyes narrowing as she pieced together the puzzle. "Those tunnels you described? They might be part of an old network. Outlaws like Billy used hidden passages to dodge posses and stash loot. Juniper Hollow's isolation, tucked away in the New Mexico desert, far from prying eyes, made it perfect." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a faded map, its edges yellowed and brittle, spreading it across the table. Her finger traced faint lines that snaked beneath the town, barely visible but suggestive of a subterranean web. "This could be it, undocumented but not impossible. If we can map it out, we might find more than just a hideout." Before Lila could press for more details, a sharp knock rattled the trailer door, the sound jarring against the quiet tension. Sheriff Morales moved with practiced ease, his hand resting near his holster as he opened it. Standing there was Jed, a reclusive ex-miner who lived 2 trailers down, his wiry frame hunched as if the weight of the earth still pressed on his shoulders. His face was shadowed by a battered hat, the brim frayed and stained with sweat, and his eyes darted nervously, avoiding direct contact. "Heard you're digging into Billy's past," he rasped, his voice rough from years underground, each word scraping like gravel. "My granddad told me tales, said Billy had gold around here. I know the land. Might help you find it." His offer hung in the air, laced with an edge Lila couldn't quite place, a tremor of unease rippling through her. His shifty eyes flicked to the revolver on the table, then away, and she felt a prickle of suspicion crawl up her spine. Morales nodded cautiously, his jaw tightening as he sized Jed up, but Lila hesitated. The promise of answers tugged at her, a lure she couldn't ignore, yet something about Jed's demeanor, his sudden interest, the way he shifted his weight like a man ready to bolt, set her on edge. Still, the weight of the mystery outweighed her doubts, and with a reluctant nod, she agreed. That night, under a moonless sky where the stars burned bright against the velvet dark, Jed led her out past the trailer park. His flashlight cut through the desert scrub, the beam dancing over twisted mesquite and scattered rocks. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the parched ground and the occasional hoot of an owl. They reached a crumbling rock formation, its jagged edges rising like the bones of the earth, and Jed pointed to a narrow crevice barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. In there, he muttered, his voice low, almost lost to the wind. Lila hesitated, the cold stone brushing her hands as she edged inside, her breath shallow in the confined space. The air grew damp and earthy, and her fingers brushed against something smooth and metallic. She pulled it free, a hidden cache of gold nuggets and coins, glinting dully in her flashlight's beam. Her breath caught, the weight of the discovery sinking in, a fortune born from the shadows of history. But before she could process it, Jed's demeanor shifted. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm with a grip like iron, his fingers digging into her skin. Hand over the chest, he snarled, a knife glinting in his other hand, its blade catching the faint light. Greed twisted his features, his eyes wild with a hunger that confirmed her suspicions. The man who'd offered help was no ally. He was a predator, driven by the same greed that had fueled Billy's legend. Lila's mind raced, her heart pounding as she calculated her next move. Before she could react, a scream pierced the night. Emma, her younger sister, shouting from the trailer in a voice raw with panic. "Lila, run!" The sound jolted Jed, his head whipping toward it, his grip loosening in surprise. Seizing the moment, Lila twisted free, her elbows slamming into his chest, shoving him back. She stumbled toward the house, her legs burning with effort, the gold forgotten in the dust. Inside, she found Emma by the window, pale but unharmed, her hands trembling as she pointed outside. "He was watching us," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I saw him lurking near the shed earlier." Lila locked the door, her chest heaving as she leaned against it, her mind reeling. The pieces fell into place. Jed's intimate knowledge of the land, his sudden interest after weeks of silence. The break-in weeks ago when someone had ransacked her trailer, overturning drawers and scattering her few possessions. He was the intruder, driven by an insatiable greed for Billy's gold, a man who'd trade trust for treasure without a second thought. But now, with Clara's map and the revolver as tangible links to the past, Lila had allies. Clara's expertise and Morales' cautious support formed a fragile bulwark against the dangers closing in. She glanced at the trapdoor, its rusted edges now a symbol of both promise and peril, resolve hardening in her chest. The tunnels held more secrets, passages that might lead to Billy's final hiding place or reveal the full scope of his operations in Juniper Hollow. Jed wouldn't stop her, his betrayal a stark reminder of the enemies lurking in the shadows. Neither would the darkness below, with its damp metal scent and whispered hum. She'd uncover the truth, no matter the cost, driven by a need to understand the legacy she'd stumbled into. The revolver sat on the table, a silent sentinel, and Lila knew she'd need every tool at her disposal, ally and artifact alike, to navigate the treacherous path ahead. The next morning, with the first light filtering through the trailer's cracked window, Lila met Clara and Morales at the diner. The air was thick with the smell of frying bacon and coffee, a stark contrast to the tension that hung between them. Clara spread the map across a booth table, her finger tracing the faint lines with renewed purpose. "If Jed knew about that cache, he might know more," she said, her voice low. "But we can't trust him now. We'll need to explore the tunnels ourselves." Morales nodded, his hand resting on his badge as if to anchor himself. "I'll get a team together, discreetly. We can't let this get out, or every treasure hunter in the state will be crawling over your land." Lila agreed, her mind already mapping the descent into the unknown. She thought of the notebook, its pages filled with cryptic diagrams and the underlined warning, "They're still watching," and wondered if the tunnels held more than gold. Perhaps they guarded a secret Billy had taken to his grave, one that tied Juniper Hollow to a larger, darker history. That afternoon, Armed with flashlights, ropes, and Clara's map, they approached the trapdoor. The creak of its hinges echoed in the silence, and as Lila descended the concrete stairs, the damp metal scent enveloped her, a reminder of the night she'd first uncovered it. The tunnel stretched out, a maze of rough-hewn walls and shadowed corners. Clara led the way, her historian's eye picking out details, a scratched initial here, a faded boot print there, while Morales kept watch, his radio crackling faintly. They found more caches, small hoards of coins and trinkets, but also signs of recent disturbance, fresh scratches, a discarded pickaxe. Jed had been here, his greed driving him deeper. The realization fueled Lila's determination. She wouldn't let him claim what she'd fought to uncover. Hours passed, the air growing colder as they ventured further. A low hum began, vibrating through the stone, and Lila froze, her flashlight trembling. Clara's eyes widened. "That's new," she whispered. They pressed on, rounding a bend to find a chamber unlike the others. Its walls were smoother, lined with shelves holding jars of preserved documents, their labels illegible with age. In the center stood a rusted safe, its door ajar. Inside, they found a ledger, its pages detailing shipments and payments, evidence of a smuggling ring that had thrived under Billy's command. Lila's hands shook as she read, the scope of the discovery overwhelming. This wasn't just about gold. It was about a network that had shaped the region's past. The hum intensified, and a shadow flickered at the chamber's edge. Morales drew his gun, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "We need to get this to the authorities," he said, his voice tight. Lila nodded. The ledger clutched to her chest. Jed might be an enemy, but the tunnels held allies in their silent revelations. The truth was within reach, and she'd protect it, even if it meant facing the unseen forces that lingered below. With Jed lurking, Lila's nerves were a taut wire, ready to snap. She'd caught glimpses of him for days, his shadow moving past her trailer at dusk, a jagged silhouette against the fading light of the New Mexico desert, his presence a constant threat that gnawed at her peace. The man's obsession with the gold was unyielding, a hunger that darkened his eyes whenever she'd seen him at the edge of Juniper Hollow. She knew he wouldn't stop until he had it. Those heavy, tarnished coins that she'd unearthed from the bunker beneath her trailer. The weight of them pressed on her mind as much as her hands when she'd first lifted them, their cold metal a burden she hadn't anticipated when she'd moved into Lot 17. Now, they were a lifeline and a curse, and she had to act before Jed's desperation turned deadly. Sitting at the rickety kitchen table, its surface scarred from years of use, Lila devised a plan. The dim glow of a single bulb overhead cast shadows across the room, and the scratch of her pencil on a scrap of paper filled the silence. She sketched out details with a trembling hand, where to hide the gold, how to get the kids to safety, how to signal for help. The kids, Noah and Emma, huddled nearby on the threadbare couch, their wide, trusting eyes fixed on her. They were young, too young to fully grasp the danger, but old enough to sense the tension thickening the air. Lila forced a steady voice, masking the fear that coiled in her chest. "We're going to be okay," she told them, though the words felt fragile. "Just stay close and do what I say." First, she moved the gold. The trailer was too exposed, its thin walls no match for Jed's determination. She'd seen him circling, testing the perimeter, his boots leaving faint impressions in the dust. Keeping it there was a gamble she couldn't afford. She chose the old well behind the barn, a crumbling relic overgrown with weeds and half forgotten by the community. Its stone walls were weathered, its depths shrouded in darkness, but it offered a hiding place that might buy her time. With a burlap sack slung over her shoulder, the coins clinking softly inside, she trudged out under the cover of night. The desert air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant howl of a coyote. She moved cautiously, her flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the gloom, every rustle of grass making her heart skip. At the well, she tied the sack to a rope, lowering it into the depths with slow, deliberate pulls. The splash as it hit the water below was muffled, and she piled debris, rocks, broken boards, and handfuls of dirt over the opening until it was hidden from sight. Her back ached from the effort, her hands scraped and dirty, but the task steadied her resolve. The gold was safe, for now, its weight transferred from her hands to the earth. Next, she turned to the kids. "Pack what you need," she told them, her tone firm but gentle, a mother's command laced with urgency. "Clothes, a blanket, anything small you can't live without. We're leaving soon." They nodded, scurrying to their rooms with the quiet efficiency of children who'd learned to trust her instincts. Noah, the older of the two at 10, gathered a stuffed bear he'd had since he was a toddler, its fur matted from years of love. Emma, 7, clutched a dog-eared book of fairy tales, its pages worn from late-night readings. Lila watched them, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and dread. She checked the trailer's corners, ensuring no trace of the gold remained. No stray coin glinting under the furniture, no map carelessly left behind. Her heart pounded with every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that danced in the corner of her eye. The trapdoor to the bunker was still locked, its secrets buried with the gold, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Jed's next move was imminent. The old CB radio, dusty on a shelf above the sink, became her lifeline. It had been a relic of the trailer's previous owner, a crackling relic she'd never bothered to use until now. She dusted it off with a rag, her fingers leaving streaks in the grime, and twisted the knobs until static crackled like a storm. She tuned to a frequency she'd overheard Morales, the local deputy, use during a late-night patrol chat. Leaning close to the microphone, her breath shallow, she pressed the talk button. "Morales, this is Lila at Lot 17. We need help. Jed's coming, and he's armed. Please, hurry." Her voice trembled, betraying her calm facade, but she forced it steady, repeating the message until the static swallowed her words. A crackle answered, then Morales' gravelly voice cut through. "Hold tight. We're on our way." The line went dead, leaving her with a fragile thread of hope. The wait was agonizing. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock on the wall a hammer against her nerves. Lila gathered the kids near the door, their small bags at their feet, and peered through the grimy window. The desert outside was a sea of shadows, the horizon swallowed by night. Headlights finally cut through the darkness. Morales and 2 deputies, their patrol car kicking up dust as it roared toward the trailer. Relief washed over her, a wave that loosened the knot in her stomach, but it was short-lived. A crash splintered the silence, the front door flying open as Jed kicked it in. His silhouette filled the frame, shotgun in hand, his face twisted with rage, eyes glinting like a predator's in the dim light. "Thought you could hide it from me," he roared, leveling the barrel at her. The kids shrank back, pressing against the wall, their breaths hitching. Lila stepped forward, shielding them with her body, her hands raised in a futile gesture of peace. "Jed, put it down," she said, her voice low and firm, though her pulse raced. "This isn't worth it. You'll hurt someone. And for what?" A few coins. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with threat. Jed's chest heaved, his words spilling like venom as he advanced. "That gold's mine by right. My granddaddy worked this land before that bastard stole it. Billy Kane and his gang took everything. I deserve it." His eyes were wild, the shotgun trembling in his grip, its muzzle swaying between Lila and the cowering children. She held his gaze, searching for a crack in his fury, but found only obsession. The trailer seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in as the standoff dragged on. Morales and the deputies burst in, guns drawn, their shouts cutting through Jed's rant. "Drop it, Jed," Morales barked, his voice a command honed by years on the force. The deputies flanked him, their movements precise, weapons trained on the intruder. Jed hesitated, his finger twitching on the trigger, then lowered the shotgun, his shoulders slumping as the fight drained from him. The deputies moved in, cuffing his wrists with a metallic clink, and led him out into the night, his protests fading into the distance. As the chaos subsided, Morales pulled Lila aside, his expression grim but relieved. "We ran his story," he said, his voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "Jed's family lost their land to the ranch's original owner, a man tied to Billy's gang. Seems the tunnels hold more than treasure. They're a legacy of betrayal, stretching back decades. Old records show disputes, threats, even a disappearance or two. You might have uncovered something bigger than you know." He glanced at the trapdoor, now a silent witness to the night's events, its rusted edges catching the faint light. "Be careful, Lila. This land's got layers we haven't peeled back yet." Lila nodded, her mind racing with the implications. The gold was safe for now, hidden in the well's depths, but the tunnel's secrets loomed larger, a shadow cast by history she couldn't ignore. She thought of the notebook she'd found, its cryptic symbols and mentions of the project, and wondered what else lay buried beneath Juniper Hollow. The kids clung to her, their small arms wrapping around her waist, and she hugged them tight, the weight of their escape plan lifting, but only just. The adrenaline still buzzed in her veins, and as she looked out the broken door at the departing patrol car, she knew this was only a pause, not an end. The gold had drawn Jed to her doorstep, but the tunnels held a story that might draw others. Curious, vengeful, or worse. She guided the kids back inside, their footsteps echoing on the splintered floor. The trailer felt different now, marked by the night's violence, its safety compromised. Lila set about boarding up the door with planks from the barn, her hands steady despite the exhaustion creeping in. Noah and Emma helped, their small hands passing nails and holding the wood in place, their earlier fear giving way to a quiet determination. As they worked, the desert wind carried a low hum, a sound she'd heard before in the bunker, and she paused, glancing toward the trapdoor. Was it coincidence, or a sign that the unseen forces tied to this land were stirring? By dawn, the door was secured, and the kids were asleep on the couch, their bags still packed. Lila sat at the kitchen table again, the scrap of paper with her plan now crumpled in her fist. She smoothed it out, adding a new line. Find out what's in the tunnels. The gold was a start, but the true treasure might be the truth about Billy Kane, about Jed's family, about the legacy etched into the desert's bones. She leaned back, the first light of morning filtering through the window, and felt a resolve harden within her. This escape had been a victory, but the journey was far from over. The ranch, the tunnels, the gold, they were hers now, and she would protect them, uncover them, no matter what lay ahead. With Jed in custody, the weight of his betrayal lingered like a storm cloud over Juniper Hollow, casting a shadow over the dusty streets and weathered trailers. The air felt heavy, charged with the tension of secrets finally breaking free. For Lila and Clara, however, Jed's arrest was not just an end, but a beginning, a chance to finally unravel the mystery that had drawn them into the depths of Lot 17. The sheriff had hauled Jed away in the early dawn, his confession to sabotaging their efforts spilling out in a bitter torrent. He'd tampered with their tools, spread rumors to keep them from the trapdoor, all to claim the rumored treasure for himself. His departure left the trailer's trapdoor unguarded, its rusted edges glinting faintly in the morning light, a silent invitation to the truth beneath. Armed with flashlights and a renewed determination that burned brighter than their exhaustion, Lila and Clara descended into the tunnels. The trapdoor creaked ominously as they lifted it, revealing the dark concrete staircase that spiraled into the earth. The air was thick with dust, each breath stirring particles that danced in the beams of their lights. The scent of earth mingled with the cold, metallic tang of the concrete walls, their surfaces rough and damp to the touch. Every step echoed faintly, a reminder of the isolation below, and yet there was an electric anticipation between the two women, a shared resolve to uncover what had been hidden for generations. The tunnel stretched further than Lila had ever imagined, a labyrinth of narrow passages carved into the desert bedrock with crude tools and desperate hands. The walls bore the scars of time, etched with cracks and stains that hinted at decades of neglect. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, illuminating patches of soil and stone. After hours of careful exploration, their beams caught on something buried beneath a pile of loose soil near a collapsed section of the tunnel. Digging with their hands and a small shovel Clara had brought, they uncovered a wooden crate, its planks warped but intact, the wood splintered and darkened by age. The lid resisted at first, but with a shared effort, it gave way, revealing a treasure trove of history. Inside were journals, their leather covers cracked and their pages yellowed and brittle, dating back to the 1870s. The handwriting was cramped, the ink faded to a ghostly brown, but the stories within leaped off the pages with vivid clarity. Lila and Clara sat cross-legged on the tunnel floor, their flashlights propped up as they pored over the entries. The journals belonged to Billy Kane, a young outlaw with a sharp mind and a restless spirit, and they chronicled his alliance with Amos Caldwell, the ranch's original owner, a stern man with a reputation for cunning. Together, they had orchestrated a daring bank robbery in the nearby town of Silver Creek, spiriting away a fortune in gold coins that had vanished from history. The journals described how Caldwell, gripped by paranoia after the heist, had hidden the loot in these tunnels, intending to retrieve it later when the heat died down. But plans changed, and the gold remained buried, a secret guarded by the earth. Among the journals, a grim discovery awaited. As they shifted the crate, their lights revealed a skeleton, its bones scattered as if discarded in haste, half buried in the soil. The skull was fractured by a blunt object, a jagged crack running across its crown, and the rib cage bore the marks of a violent end. Clara, with her steady hands and a background in local archaeology from her days volunteering at a museum, pieced together the clues with a forensic eye. The skeleton was likely a betrayed accomplice, silenced by Caldwell to protect the secret of the gold. The realization sent a shiver through Lila, her flashlight trembling in her grip. This wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was a graveyard of greed, a testament to the lengths men would go to secure their fortune. Their search continued, and soon the gold itself was found in a rusted metal box tucked behind a natural crevice in the tunnel wall. The lid groaned as they pried it open, revealing its contents glinting faintly under their lights. Dozens of gold coins, their surfaces worn smooth by time, but still heavy with promise. Clara, ever the pragmatist, estimated its value at $200,000, a sum that could transform Lila's life. She could pay off the trailer's mounting debts, secure a future for herself and Noah, maybe even leave Juniper Hollow behind for a fresh start elsewhere. The weight of the coins in her hands felt like a lifeline, a chance to escape the endless cycle of struggle that had defined her years in the desert. But as she held a coin, its edges cool against her skin, a moral dilemma gnawed at her. Keeping it felt wrong. A theft piled atop the original sin of the robbery and the murder that followed. The gold carried the stain of blood and betrayal, a legacy she wasn't sure she wanted to inherit. Turning it over to the state, however, meant losing it all, money she desperately needed to rebuild her life. The conflict churned within her, a storm of practicality and principle, as she stared into the dim tunnel, the skeleton's empty sockets seeming to watch her from shadows. That evening, back in the trailer, Lila sat with Emma, the museum curator who had become an unexpected ally in this journey. The trailer's cramped living room was lit by a single lamp, its warm glow casting shadows on the walls as Emma flipped through the journals, her eyes sparkling with scholarly excitement. Her fingers traced the outlaw's words, lingering on descriptions of Billy's daring escapes and Caldwell's ruthless decisions. "This is history," she said softly, her voice filled with reverence. Billy wasn't just a criminal. He was a survivor, fighting for a life in a harsh land. We could honor that. She proposed a museum exhibit, using the gold and journals to tell the story of the heist, the betrayal, and the tunnel's secrets, with Lila's name attached as the discoverer. The state might offer compensation, and the exhibit could draw tourists to Juniper Hollow, bringing money to the town and a share to Lila for her role. Lila stared at the coin in her hand, feeling a strange kinship with Billy. He'd fought for survival, just as she had, scrambling to keep her trailer afloat, to find her place in a town that often felt indifferent. The gold wasn't just wealth. It was a legacy tangled with blood and betrayal, yet also with the resilience that had carried her this far. She thought of Noah, his laughter filling the trailer, and the dreams she'd shelved for lack of means. The weight of the decision pressed on her, but Emma's words offered a path forward. After a long silence, broken only by the creak of the trailer settling, Lila nodded. "Let's do it," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "But I want it told right, his story in mind. No glossing over the dark parts." The decision lifted a burden from her shoulders, replacing it with a sense of purpose. As Emma sketched plans for the exhibit on a notepad, her pencil scratching out details of displays and timelines, Lila glanced at the trapdoor, now propped open in the corner. It had become a symbol of both danger and discovery, a portal to a past that had shaped her present. The gold would stay, preserved as part of the exhibit, but its truth would be set free, a testament to the past and a bridge to her future. She imagined the museum, its walls lined with Billy's journals and the glint of his gold, tourists wandering through, learning of the outlaw's life and her own tenacity. It wasn't the wealth she dreamed of, but it was a legacy she could live with. The next morning, as the sun rose over Juniper Hollow, Lila and Clara returned to the tunnels with Emma in tow, determined to document every detail. They mapped the passages, noting the skeleton's position and the crate's location, their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. Emma recorded the journal's contents, transcribing faded passages about the robbery's planning, how Billy had scouted the bank for weeks, how Caldwell had bribed a guard. The story unfolded like a novel, each page revealing more. The tension of the heist, the betrayal of their accomplice, the paranoia that drove Caldwell to kill. Lila felt a pang of sympathy for Billy, a man caught in a web of his own making, much like she had been caught in Jed's schemes. As they worked, the tunnel seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as if the past were alive in the air. Lila paused, her hand on the cold wall, and listened. The sound was faint, almost imagined, a whisper of wind or the echo of footsteps long gone. She shook it off, attributing it to fatigue, but the sensation lingered. Clara noticed her hesitation and offered a reassuring smile. "We're rewriting history here," she said. "Every step we take, we're giving it new meaning." By midday, they emerged, their arms laden with evidence, journals, sketches, and the metal box of gold. The sheriff arrived to secure the find, promising to involve the state's historical society. Lila watched as the coins were cataloged, her heart a mix of relief and loss. She'd traded the immediate fortune for something greater, a story that would endure. That afternoon, she sat with Noah on the trailer steps, explaining the decision. His eyes widened at the tale of Billy and the gold, and he nodded solemnly. "You did the right thing, Mom," he said, his young voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. As dusk fell, Lila stood alone by the trapdoor, the evening breeze carrying the scent of sagebrush. She thought of Billy, of Caldwell, of Jed, each a piece of the puzzle that had led her here. The gold was gone from her hands, but its legacy remained, a thread connecting her to the land and its people. She closed the trapdoor gently, sealing the tunnels once more, but this time with a sense of closure. The truth was out, and with it, a new chapter for Juniper Hollow, and for her. The exhibit opened months later, a modest affair in a refurbished barn on the edge of town. The journals were displayed in glass cases, their pages preserved, while the gold coins gleamed under soft lights. A plaque bore Lila's name, alongside Billy's, honoring their intertwined stories. Tourists trickled in, their murmurs filling the space, and Lila felt a quiet pride. The compensation from the state was modest, enough to fix the trailer's roof and save a little for Noah's future, but the real reward was the respect she earned. The town, once divided by suspicion, began to heal, its history no longer a burden but a source of pride. Late one night, as she sat by the fireplace with the framed note from Billy, "Live free," hung above, Lila heard the hum again, clearer now, a gentle pulse from the earth. She smiled, knowing it was no ghost, but the echo of her own journey, a reminder of the strength she'd found in the darkness. The trapdoor remained closed, but its story lived on, a beacon for the future she was building, one step at a time. The state negotiated a deal. Lila kept 20% of the gold, with the rest funding a historical site on the ranch. The tunnels became a tourist attraction, drawing visitors to learn about Billy the Kid. Lila used her share to renovate the hacienda, adding a community center for single parents. Noah proudly showed off the gold room, while Emma wrote a school report on Billy, blending fact with their adventure. The ranch, once deserted, buzzed with life, but Lila kept the well's secrets. Another pouch of gold, hidden, a private nod to her resilience. Years later, as the ranch thrived, strange occurrences persisted. Footsteps in the tunnels, a whistle on the wind. Locals whispered of Billy's ghost, guarding his gold. Lila smiled at the tales, believing it was the spirit of survival, not vengeance. One evening, digging near the well, Noah found a final note. Live free, B. Lila framed it above the fireplace, a reminder of her journey from a $300 trailer to a ranch of legends. With her kids grown and the community strong, she knew the gold wasn't just wealth. It was the courage to start anew.